The wine cellar beneath Castle Morinhall had 3 doors, and Serene knew the location of every one of them. She knew because she had walked these tunnels barefoot for 6 months, slipping down from the servants' wing in the dead hours of night, following the path Vedrick had shown her the first time he ever called her his. The cellar was their place. The stone walls were thick enough to swallow whispers. The torches burned low enough to hide a king and a kitchen girl tangled together in the dark. She had not come tonight to be held. She had come because the steward had passed her in the corridor that afternoon and told her, without quite meeting her eyes, that the king was hosting a private supper for his sworn brothers. No women would be present. No servants beyond the butler. The doors would be sealed. It was the first night in half a year that Vedrick had not summoned her. Serene had stood very still in the corridor with a basket of linens against her hip, and she had felt the small bright thing in her belly turn over for the first time. A flutter, a presence, a truth she had been carrying alone for 19 days. She had decided then to find out why he had not come for her. The cellar was empty when she arrived, but she had not come to the cellar itself. She had come to the listening passage that ran behind it, the narrow corridor the old kings had built in case they ever needed to hear what their guests said when they thought themselves unheard. Vedrick had shown it to her once, laughing, calling it a relic of suspicious men. She did not think he had ever expected her to use it. She moved through the passage with her hand against the cold stone, her heart loud in her ears, her other hand pressed flat to her belly as if to keep the small bright thing quiet. The voices reached her before the light did, men laughing, the clatter of cups, the deep, familiar timbre of the man whose teeth had marked her hip 9 weeks past, in the long, warm dusk before the autumn frost first came down off the moors. Cyrene stopped at the listening grate. Through the iron lattice she could see the long oak table, the firelight, and the 6 warriors lounging in their high-backed chairs with their boots on the wood. Vedrick sat at the head, his ceremonial collar undone, and his dark hair loose around his shoulders. He was smiling. He was smiling the way he smiled when he was pleased with himself. "Tell us, then," said Lord Hassan, the youngest of the sworn brothers, leaning forward. "We have heard the rumors for a fortnight. The whole castle is whispering. Was she worth it?" Vedrick laughed. It was a low, easy sound, the laugh of a man who had nothing left to prove. "Worth every coin of the bride price," he said. "Worth every wound my pride took during the negotiations. Lady Theron of the Silverwoods is the most magnificent creature I have ever seen. And by midwinter she will be standing beside me on the high stone with my mark on her throat." Serene's hand closed around the iron lattice. The men cheered. Cups struck the table. Someone shouted a toast to the future queen. "What is she like?" Hassan pressed. "Truly. Not the courtly version." Vedrick leaned back. The smile on his face was something Serene had never seen before. Or perhaps she had simply never recognized it for what it was. "She is everything a king should want," he said. "Bred for it, trained for it. She speaks 4 languages and rides better than any of you. Her father will give me 3,000 spears the day I sign the marriage contract. And when I walked with her in the gardens last week, she did not lower her eyes or stammer or apologize for her own breathing. She knew exactly what she was. She is a woman, my brothers, not a frightened mouse playing at love." The cellar swam. Cyrene felt her knees give beneath her, and she caught herself on the cold stone with the hand that did not hold her belly. "And the kitchen girl?" Hassan asked, and his voice had dropped to the conspiratorial register men used when they thought their words would be forgotten. "The little brown-haired one, the healer. We have all seen her slipping out of your chambers." Vedrick waved a hand. The gesture was so small. The gesture was so easy. "A pleasant winter," he said. "Nothing more. She has been kind to me during a difficult season. I will see her settled somewhere comfortable when the time comes. A cottage in the hills, a small purse. She is a sweet creature. She deserves a quiet life away from court." Did she truly believe you meant to make her your queen? Vedrik smiled again. The same smile. Women believe what they want to believe, Hassan. I never promised her a crown. I let her dream because her dreams made her generous. There is no harm in a kindness given freely. The men laughed. Cyrene did not remember sliding down the wall. She did not remember pressing her forehead to the stone. She did not remember the moment her teeth bit through the inside of her cheek and the taste of iron filled her mouth. She remembered only the small, bright thing turning over inside her, gentle, oblivious, the only honest creature left in the world that loved her. She did not weep. She had no weeping left. She rose. She walked back through the listening passage. She climbed the servant's stair to the chamber she had been given the night Vedrik first told her she was his. The chamber with the narrow window that looked out over the courtyard. The chamber where she had stood 1,000 times waiting for his footsteps in the corridor. She packed the carved wooden comb her mother had left her. The blue wool cloak. The small leather pouch of dried yarrow and motherwort she had been preparing for the sickness that had begun to wake her at dawn. She left the silver bracelet he had given her on the pillow. At the threshold, she paused. She placed her hand against her belly. You will never know him, she whispered. I will not raise you on a lie. You will be only mine. She slipped down the back stair. She took the southern gate, where the guard was a boy of 17, who had been kind to her once when she had brought him soup during a fever. He let her through without a word. She did not look at him. She did not look back at the castle. She walked out into the snow that had begun to fall in soft, slow flakes across the empty road, and she did not stop walking until the towers of Morinhall were no more than a smudge of dark against the lightening sky. She did not see the figure at the high north window of the keep, the figure who had been watching the cellar entrance for the past 2 hours, and the figure whose gray eyes were fixed on her vanishing silhouette with an expression of slowly dawning horror. She did not hear the sound that man made when he understood at last what had been done. It was not a howl. It was not a roar. It was the small breaking sound of a man whose voice had been stolen from him for half a year without his ever once having known. By the time the king's true voice returned to him an hour before dawn, Cyrene was already gone. The village of Brackmere did not ask questions. This was the first thing Cyrene had learned about the moor country, the first kindness it had offered her. The shepherds and weavers and tinsmiths who lived in the low stone houses scattered across the heather had watched her arrive in the deep cold of midwinter with a swelling belly and a hollow face, and they had given her bread and a place by the fire and a name to use, and they had asked her nothing. She had told them she was called Wenna. She had told them her husband had died of fever. She had told them she had healing hands. 3 of those things were lies. 1 of them was not. She had not lifted her healing hands once during her time at Morinhall, because Vedrik had asked her not to. He had told her that her gift was sacred, that it should not be spent on common ailments, that a woman with such a light in her palms would draw attention from the wrong sort of eyes. She had believed him. She had believed everything he said. In Brackmere, she lifted her hands again. She set the broken arm of a shepherd's boy who had fallen from a stone wall. She drew the milk fever from a young mother whose baby had gone 3 days without nursing. She mixed willow bark tisane and foxglove syrup and green poultice for chilblains, and she walked from cottage to cottage in the long blue twilights of the high moor, and she earned her bread. The villagers gave her a cottage at the edge of the heather, where the land sloped down toward the bog and the air smelled of peat and bog myrtle. The cottage had a fire that drew well, and a small stone hearth, and a single, narrow bed. She slept in that bed with her hands folded over her belly, and she felt the small bright thing inside her turn and stretch and grow, and sometimes, in the deepest part of the night, she felt it turn from 2 different places at once. The midwife, an old woman named Brella, had pressed her fingers against the curve of Cyrene's belly one cold morning and clucked her tongue. 2 hearts, Brella had said. Maybe 3. You are carrying a litter, my girl. Cyrene had laughed for the first time in months. A litter. As if she were a hound. And yet the word had been so close to the truth that it had taken her breath. She did not tell Brella what she suspected. She did not tell anyone. The babies were hers. They were the only thing in the world that was hers. But the mark would not stop burning. 4 months had passed since the night in the cellar, and Vedric's claiming bite still pulsed against the skin of her hip like a coal that refused to die. Among the wolf-born, a rejection severed the bond. The scar should have faded within a moon. The mark should have become only a mark. Hers had darkened. Hers had grown warm. Hers ached when the wind blew from the north, from the direction of Morinhall, and sometimes in the dawn hours she swore she could feel something on the other side of the ache. Something searching, something reaching, and something that wept. She told herself it was grief. She told herself that grief could feel like presence. She told herself a great many things, and none of them mattered, because the mark kept burning, and the babies kept growing, and the wind kept blowing from the north. On a warm day in early summer, Brella's granddaughter came running across the heather to her cottage door. "Mistress Wenna," the girl said, breathless, "there are riders from the south. 4 of them. They came through the pass at dawn." Cyrene set down the bowl of crushed comfrey. "Riders," she said. "Wolf-born," the girl said, and her voice dropped on the word the way village voices always did. "Big men. Their horses are huge. They are asking at the smithy for a healer who came last winter from the lowlands." Cyrene's hands did not shake. She had practiced not shaking. "What did the smith tell them?" "That there is no such healer," the girl said proudly. "That you have been here since before he was born. He sent them on toward the western moor." The girl did not understand why Cyrene knelt and kissed her forehead. The girl did not understand that the smith had bought her perhaps a single afternoon, perhaps 2, perhaps no time at all. When the girl had gone, Cyrene stood at the doorway of her cottage and looked across the heather at the long, slow rise of the hills, and she did not see riders. She saw the figure of an old man in a gray cloak, walking up the path from the bog road. He was alone. He carried no sword. He moved at the unhurried pace of someone who already knew where he was going. She closed the door. She slid the latch. She placed her back against the wood and listened to her own heartbeat for what felt like a very long time. A knock came. 3 slow strokes. "Mistress Wenna," said a voice on the other side of the door. The voice was old. The voice was tired. The voice carried the slow vowels of the inner court. "I have walked a great distance to find you. I will not break your door. I will sit on this stone outside, and I will wait for you to be ready." Cyrene did not answer. She could not. The old man, true to his word, sat on the flat stone beside her door, and she heard him sigh as he lowered himself onto it, and she heard him begin to hum a slow tune that she recognized, after a moment, as a lullaby from the kitchens of Morinhall. A song the old cook used to sing while she kneaded bread. Cyrene opened the door. He looked up at her. His eyes were the soft gray of doves. His beard was white. He had been weeping recently. She could see the faint salt tracks at the corners of his eyes. "My Lady Cyrene," he said, "that is not my name." "It is the only name you have, child." She did not invite him in. She stood in the doorway with her arms folded across her belly and her chin lifted. "Who are you?" "My name is Olvar. I served as master of the inner hall for the late king, your king's father, for 31 years. I changed your king's nappies when he was a babe. I taught him to read." Olvar's mouth twitched in something that was almost a smile. "I am the only man in Morinhall who is not afraid of him. This is why he sent me to find you." "He sent you?" "He does not know I have found you. He knows only that I am searching. Will you let me speak inside, where the wind cannot carry it?" Cyrene stepped aside. Olvar entered her cottage and looked around it with the slow attentiveness of a man cataloging a story. The drying herbs, the wooden bowl of comfrey, The narrow bed with its single woven blanket. The small carved comb on the windowsill. He turned to her with his hat in his hands. "You did not flee because the king rejected you," he said. "You fled because you heard him speak words in a cellar that no man of his blood would ever truly speak. Is that correct?" Cyrene's breath stopped. "How do you know what I heard?" "Because for half a year before you fled, my lady, the king of Moranhall was not the king of Moranhall. The man you saw at that table, the man whose laughter you heard, the man who spoke of you as a kindness and of Lady Theron as a prize, that man was wearing my king's face. He was not my king. He has not been my king since the autumn equinox." Cyrene's hand went to the wall. "That is not possible." "It is not common," said Olvar gently, "but it is possible. The Silverwoods are an old house, the oldest. They keep arts that the outer kingdoms have forgotten. There is a working called the Fethrin, the borrowed skin. It is woven from a lock of a man's hair, a drop of a man's blood, and a moonless night. It allows another to wear his shape and speak with his voice for a season. The true man is held elsewhere, sleeping, dreaming, lost to himself. But the bite," Cyrene whispered. Her hand had moved to her hip without her permission. "The bite was given to me before all of that. Before the equinox, in late summer, by Vedric himself. Yes, my lady, the bite was real. The bond was real. The man who gave it to you was the man who loved you, and he loved you long enough to mark you before they took him. That is how my king knew, even sleeping, that you were alive somewhere in the world. The bond was the only piece of him they could not borrow. They wore his face. They wore his voice. They could not wear his teeth in your skin." Cyrene sat down. Her legs did not consult her about it. "He never said those things in the cellar. He never said any of them. The man in the cellar was a Silverwood cousin called Arion. He has worn my king's face since the equinox. He chose Lady Theron because Lady Theron is his sister." Cyrene closed her eyes. The cellar voice. The cellar laugh. The cellar smile she had never seen before. She had told herself for months that she had simply never known him. She had told herself that the man who whispered her name in the dark had been the lie, and the man at the long table had been the truth. She had been wrong. "Why have you not told him where I am?" "Because, my lady, the Silverwoods know you are alive. They know you carry the king's child. They sent men south 3 weeks past to find you before he could. The riders at the smithy this morning are not my king's men. They are Arion's. And they are not here to bring you home." He drew a folded square of vellum from inside his cloak and held it out to her with a hand that trembled only slightly. "This was intercepted from a Silverwood courier. Read it, child." Cyrene took the vellum. Her fingers were cold. She unfolded it. "The mongrel and her whelps must not survive the spring. Find her. End her. Bring me a strand of her hair, that I may know it is done." A wolf howled somewhere out on the heather. Close. Very close. Not a moor wolf. A larger throat. A pack throat. Olvar was on his feet before Cyrene was. "They have come faster than I thought," he said. Through the small window above her hearth, Cyrene saw 4 shapes detaching themselves from the dusk at the bottom of the slope. 4 shapes that were not quite men and not quite wolves. 4 shapes that moved through the heather toward her cottage with the smooth, coordinated patience of hunters who had found their kill. The first arrow struck the door before she could reach the latch. The arrow punched through the oak and stopped, quivering, 3 fingers from Olvar's throat. The old man did not flinch. He turned slowly and looked at the black fletching with the calm expression of a man who had seen worse arrows in his time. "Down," he said to Cyrene, and his voice had changed. The softness was still there, but there was something underneath it now. Something old and hard. The voice of a man who had once been more than a master of the inner hall. Cyrene dropped behind the heavy table. The table was old oak, scarred from generations of kneading bread. It would not stop a second arrow. It would slow one. "Olvar," Listen to me, child. He was moving across the cottage with a speed she had not believed possible from a man his age, throwing the iron bar across the back door, kicking the rag rug aside to reveal the trapdoor she had not known existed. The cellar is below, there is a passage. It comes out at the willow grove down the slope. You will run. You will not stop. You will not look back. You cannot fight for Wolfborn alone. Olvar smiled. The smile reached his eyes for the first time since she had met him. My lady, he said gently, I have not been only a master of the inner hall. The late king did not entrust the raising of his son to a man who could not fight. Go down. Go now. A second arrow shattered the small window above the hearth. Glass rained across the floor. Cyrene heard the heavy thud of bodies hitting the door. She did not move toward the trapdoor. Olvar saw it in her face. His own face hardened. Serene. The children. They will catch me on the slope. They will catch me in the willow grove. They are Wolfborn, Olvar. I cannot outrun them. We both know this. The door cracked. A long split opened down the center of it. Through the split, Cyrene could see a wedge of gray muzzle and a single pale eye. She rose to her full height behind the table. She had not used the gift in half a year, and only sparingly in Brackmere, and never, in all her life, had she used it the way her grandmother had warned her never to use it. Healing is the small song her grandmother had said when she was 9 years old, sitting on the woman's lap in front of the peat fire. There is a great song, child. There is a song that is the other side of healing. You are never to sing it. You are never even to hum it. Promise me. She had promised. She was about to break the promise. She lifted her hands. The light came easily. The light had been waiting in her palms for years, banked like a buried fire. And when she called it now, it rose without hesitation. And it was not the soft gold of a healer's gift. It was white. It was the white of bone in moonlight. The white of frost on a grave. It was the great song. Olvar saw it and went very still. My lady, he whispered, and there was something in his voice she did not have time to name. My lady, who taught you that? The door gave way. 2 of the Wolfborn came through it shoulder to shoulder, already in the half shape, mouths long, hands hooked into claws. The 3rd followed in full wolf form. The 4th stayed back with the bow. Cyrene did not aim. She had no idea how to aim. She simply opened her hands. The white light went out from her in a single soundless wave, and where it touched the Wolfborn stopped. They did not fall. They did not burn. They simply forgot, for a long suspended heartbeat, what they had been about to do. The half-shapes blurred. The wolf in the doorway sat down on its haunches like a confused dog. The archer's bow lowered 3 inches. Olvar moved. She had never seen a man his age move like that. He crossed the room in 2 long strides, and the small knife from his belt was suddenly very large and very fast, and the nearest Wolfborn opened from collarbone to belt before he understood that his moment of forgetting had ended. The second Wolfborn turned, snarling, his memory rushing back, and Olvar drove the knife up under his jaw and held it there until the man stopped moving. The wolf in the doorway shook itself and stood. The archer drew again. Cyrene's light flickered. She had never used the great song before. She did not know how much it cost. She knew now. The cost was the heat in her own chest. The cost was the breath in her own throat. She felt the world tilting, and she put a hand on the table to keep herself upright, and the white light around her hands began to thin. The archer's arrow flew. It would have struck her in the throat. It did not, because Olvar stepped into its path, and the arrow that should have killed her struck him instead, high on the left shoulder, and he did not fall, but he staggered, and the wolf in the doorway saw its chance and lunged. Cyrene threw her last fistful of light at the wolf, and the wolf went sideways through the air and struck the wall of her cottage and lay still. The archer drew a 3rd arrow. The cottage door, what remained of it, was kicked entirely off its hinges by something that came through it like a cannonball. Cyrene saw a shape, a man shape, a man's bare back, and a man's bare arms and a man's tangled black hair. And the shape took the archer by the throat and lifted him entirely off the floor. And the archer's third arrow went up into the rafters and stuck there, and the archer's body went into the stone of the hearth with a sound Cyrene would hear in dreams for the rest of her life. The man dropped the body. He turned. His eyes were gray. They were the gray she remembered. They were not the gray she remembered. Something had broken in them, and something else had been born in the broken place, and she did not know whether to call the new thing a man or a wolf or a king. He saw her. He did not move. He did not speak. He looked at her belly. He looked at her face. He looked at her hands, which were still faintly white, the last of the great song fading from her fingers. Frederick of Morinhall sank to his knees on the broken threshold of her cottage. He did not weep. He had no weeping left in him, the way she had once had no weeping left in her. He simply knelt, with his bare chest streaked in the blood of the men he had killed, running across half a kingdom to reach her, and he looked up at the woman he had not seen since the late summer dusk, and he said in a voice so low and so cracked it barely carried across the broken room, "Forgive me. I did not know. I did not know." Cyrene did not answer. Behind her, Olvar was sliding slowly down the wall with the black arrow still in his shoulder. The wolf by the wall was beginning to stir. Out on the dark heather, more shapes were moving. The 4 riders had been only the first. Cyrene did not move toward him. She stood behind the heavy oak table with her hands still tingling from the great song, and she watched the man on his knees in her doorway, and she felt nothing at all where she had expected to feel a great many things. This was a stranger. This was not the stranger from the cellar. This was a different stranger. This man had arrived at her door covered in another man's blood, with his ribs showing through his skin, and his hair matted with what looked like a week of road dust, and his bare feet bleeding from running on stones he had been too desperate to feel. This man, she realized slowly, was the man she had known in the dark. The man she had heard in the cellar had been someone else entirely. "Cyrene," Frederick said, and he did not move from his knees. He did not reach for her. "Are you hurt?" "The arrow. The wolf. Did any of it touch you?" She found her voice on the second try. "I am not hurt." He closed his eyes. His shoulders sagged so completely that for a moment she thought he had fallen forward, and then she saw that he was simply breathing, and the way a man who has held his breath for 16 days finally allows himself to breathe. Olvar coughed against the wall. The sound broke the spell. Cyrene was moving before she remembered choosing to move. She crossed the cottage and knelt beside the old man with her hands already lifting, and the gold light of the small song came back to her palms as easily as it had ever come. "Hold still," she said. She broke the shaft of the arrow at the wood with the heel of her hand. She did not pull it. She set her glowing palms flat against his shoulder above and below the wound and let the small song do what it knew how to do. The arrowhead loosened in his flesh. The flesh closed around the place the arrowhead had been. The blood slowed. When she lifted her hands, Olvar was looking at her with an expression she did not understand. "Where did you learn the great song, child?" "I did not learn it." "Then where did it come from?" "I do not know." Behind her, Frederick had risen to his feet at last. She heard him step into the cottage. She did not turn. "There are more of them," he said. His voice had begun to remember itself. It was lower than the cellar voice had been. It carried a roughness the cellar voice had never carried. 8 more, perhaps 10. I outran them on the high pass. They will be on the slope before the moon clears the ridge." Cyrene rose. Her knees protested. The babies inside her had gone very still, the way small creatures go still when the larger creatures around them have drawn too near. She turned to face the man who had crossed half a kingdom to find her. He was waiting. He was waiting with his hands open at his sides and his eyes on her face. and she saw, for the first time, the depth of what had been done to him. He was thinner than he had ever been. He had not slept. He had not eaten. He had run through frost on bare feet because somewhere in his ruined head he had decided that boots would slow him. And he was waiting, because he understood somehow that she was not yet ready to be reached for. "Tell me why I should believe a word that comes out of your mouth," she said. He flinched. He did not look away. "You should not. Not on my word alone. Olvar can tell you what was done. You can ride to the Silverwood Keep and look upon the body of the man who wore my face. You can speak to the woman I dragged out of the chamber where they kept me sleeping. You can have 100 witnesses. You should have 100 witnesses, Cyrene. I am not asking you to believe me. I am asking you to let me stand near you while you decide." He laughed about me, in the cellar. He laughed. "I know. He called me a kindness. I know. He said I deserved a quiet life." Vedric's voice broke on the next word, and she was not prepared for the breaking. "Cyrene, I have not slept since I learned. I have not eaten since I learned. I came back to that castle and I went into my own bedchamber and I burned every garment he had worn there. I burned the sheets. I burned the pillows. I would have burned the room if Olvar had not stopped me. I do not want to live in any room where his voice has been. I cannot bear that he wore me and you believed him. I cannot bear that for half a year you have been alone with what he said, and I was sleeping under a stone floor in the keep of his sister, and I did not know." She had not meant to walk toward him. Her body did it without her permission. She stopped a single pace away, close enough to feel the heat coming off him, close enough to see the wrong gray of his eyes, the gray of a man who had been holding back what he carried because he knew that if he let it out, it would crush him. "What did he tell her?" she asked. "Lady Theron, what did the man wearing your face promise her?" "Everything." His mouth twisted. "A throne, a bed, a son. Every promise I had ever made to you, he made to her in my voice." The mark on her hip flared, not the slow, steady burn it had carried for months, a bright, sharp pulse, like a bell struck once. She drew a breath at the suddenness of it, and Vedric drew a breath at the same instant, and his hand went, instinctively, to the place at the side of his ribs where she had bitten him on the night he first told her she was his. "You felt that," she whispered. "I have felt every one, every burn, every ache, every hour of every day since they took me." His voice was very quiet. "The working could borrow my face. It could borrow my voice. It could not borrow the bond. The bond was the only piece of me they could not take. I lay under that stone floor for half a year, Cyrene, and the only thing I knew was that you were alive somewhere, and that you were hurting, and that I could not reach you." She put her hand on his chest. She did not know she was going to. She did it because her hand wanted to. Beneath her palm, his heartbeat was hard and uneven, the heartbeat of a man who had been running for too long. "I left you," she said. "I left you under a stone floor. You did not know I was there." "Cyrene." His hand came up. It hovered over hers, not quite landing. "Walking out of my castle on the night you heard a stranger laugh in my voice was the wisest thing you have ever done. If you had stayed, they would have killed you. You did what your blood told you to do. You kept the children alive. You kept yourself alive. You did not fail me. You saved us both." She closed her eyes. The babies inside her turned. Both of them, at the same instant on opposite sides of her belly, as if they had been listening and had reached, at last, the part of the conversation that mattered to them. His hand finally settled over hers. Outside, on the dark slope of the heather, a wolf bayed. Olvar pushed himself up off the wall. He still looked gray, but his eyes were sharp. "They are at the lower stones, sire. 6 minutes. Perhaps 7. Vedric did not turn his head. He did not move his hand from over hers. "How many men did you bring north with you?" Cyrene asked. 40. "They are an hour behind me. I outran them at the river. Then we have to hold for an hour. We, she said. She lifted her free hand and the gold light came to it, and she set it against the long, shallow cut on his cheekbone, and the cut closed under her fingers, and she watched the color come back into his face for the first time since she had seen him kneel in her doorway. My lord, Olvar said quietly, there is something the lady should know before they reach us. Vedrik opened his eyes. What? Her gift. Where it came from. Cyrene's hand stilled against Vedrik's cheek. Speak, Olvar. The old man drew a long breath. Out on the slope, another wolf bayed closer. I served your grandmother, child, before I served the king's father. I served her for 11 years in the high country. The Silverwoods took her daughter from her. Your mother, when the child was 4 years old. They cage that bloodline. They breed it. They have hunted it for 9 generations. But your mother escaped them, Cyrene. She escaped at 16. She ran south. She found work in the kitchens of Morinhall under a false name, and she died there, bringing you into the world. And the cooks raised you as one of their own, because they did not know what else to do with a foundling girl who had a faint gold light in her small palms when she cried. Cyrene heard her own breath go out of her. My mother was the last living daughter of the great song before you. You are not a kitchen girl. You never were. You are the heir of a line the Silverwoods have been trying to murder since before the founding of Morinhall. They were not after the throne when they put on my king's face. They were after a child of yours and his. They needed the great song to come home to the silver tree. They needed you to die in childbirth so the babies could be claimed. The wolves on the slope began to run. The cottage held what it could. Vedrik and Olvar moved together, the way old soldiers move, the way men who have fought beside each other through more than one long night will move without needing to speak. Olvar dragged the long oak table across the broken doorway. Vedrik tore the iron hooks out of the rafters and braced the back door with them. She had used the great song twice now, and she could feel it sitting under her ribs like a coal she had not known was hers. The cost was her breath. The cost was her balance. She would have one more use of it tonight, perhaps 2. After that, she would be a woman again, a woman with 2 unborn children inside her and no defense beyond a knife. The first wolf hit the table. The oak shuddered. A second hit. A third. Vedrik set his shoulder against the wood and held, and Cyrene saw for the first time what he was without the trappings of court. He was not a king holding a door. He was a wolf in human shape, and his shape was enormous. Olvar lifted his small, bright knife. Hold the door, sire. Hold it for 30 heartbeats. That is all I need. Olvar, no. 30 heartbeats. The old man knelt in the middle of the cottage floor, and he laid both his hands flat on the boards, and he began to sing. It was not a song Cyrene knew. It was older than any song she knew. It was 3 notes only, repeated, low, the way a man hums to a horse that has gone wild. It crawled along the floor. It crawled up the walls. It reached the broken doorway and went out through it across the heather, and Cyrene heard, on the slope outside, the wolves of the Silverwood pack break their attack and begin to keen. They did not run. They could not run. They began to circle, low to the ground, their voices rising in a long, thin wail, the sound of beasts who had heard a thing their bones remembered from before they were beasts. Vedrik stared at the old man kneeling on the floorboards. You are Karen Rule, he said. I was, sire. Once. You have been a Karen Rule for 31 years and you never told my father. He never asked. Olvar's hands were trembling on the boards. The 3 notes came harder now, harder and slower, and Cyrene could see the cost of them in the bend of his neck and the sweat on his brow. I will hold them for as long as I can. It will not be long. Take her out the back. Run, sire. Run while I sing. Olvar. Cyrene crossed the cottage and knelt in front of him. She put both of her hands on top of his hands, and she let the small song come into her palms. I am not running. I am holding with you. Child. Sing your 3 notes. I will pour the small song into them. The cost is mine. The walls are mine. They will not get through this door tonight." He drew a long breath. He looked up at his king, who was standing now with his hand still on her wrist, his face stricken. "My lady," Olvar whispered. "Your grandmother would be proud of you." She smiled at him. The smile was small and shaking, and the first real smile that had come to her face in half a year. "Sing, Olvar." He sang. She poured. The cottage walls began to glow. Not the white of the great song, the gold of the small song, the healer's gold, but multiplied, woven through the 3 old notes, pressed against the stones until the stones themselves began to hum. Out on the slope, the wolves of the Silverwood pack broke at last, every one of them, and ran. When the gold faded from the walls, she sat back on her heels. Her face was wet. She had not noticed the tears. Olvar took her hands and pressed them to his forehead. "Child of the great song," he said, "you have done a thing tonight that has not been done in 9 generations. The cottage has been sealed. They cannot cross the threshold of this house while you live. Not the wolves, not Arion, not Theron herself. Then we are safe. We are safe inside this cottage. We are safe nowhere else. Your king has 40 men an hour behind him. The Silverwoods have 800. We must reach Morenhall before they do." Vaedric had crossed the room. His face had set into something Serene had never seen on him before, a ferocity so bright and so cold it took her breath. "They will not reach Morenhall before us," he said. "I will see them in the ground first." "Sire, they may already be at the gate." He went very still. "Speak, Olvar." "When I left the keep 3 nights past, my lord, the southern banners were riding in, Lady Theron's banners. She was claiming the right of the betrothal her brother arranged in your stolen voice. By now she may be sitting on the high stone." Vaedric's hand closed on the back of a chair. The wood split under his fingers. "The high stone is not hers." "The council does not know that, sire." "Then the council will know it before midnight." He turned to Cyrene. The ferocity was still in his face, but when he looked at her it gentled, the way a banked forge gentles when the bellows stops. "Can you ride hard?" She placed her hands on her belly. She felt the babies turn. "They are strong," she said. "Stronger than I am, I think. They will hold." He came to her. He kissed her forehead, lightly. Then he kissed her mouth, and the kiss was not light at all. When he drew back, his gray eyes had filled with something she did not yet have a name for. "My queen," he said. He did not say it loudly. He said it the way a man says a word he has been saving in his mouth for half a year, afraid to spend it, afraid to lose it. The mark on her hip flared, and his answering pulse came back to her through the bond like a struck bell, and she knew, suddenly, that she could feel his heart beating against her palm without her palm being anywhere near his chest. The bond had not broken. The bond had been waiting for them to find each other again. They left the cottage at the deepest hour of the night. 3 horses, 3 riders. The bog rode south, then the river rode east. Then the long high pass that would take them down into the valley of Morenhall before the dawn. They did not speak much. They did not need to. Halfway down the pass, when the first cold light began to show along the eastern ridge, Cyrene saw the towers of the city she had fled in the snow. They were burning. Not the whole city. The eastern wall, the barracks, the stables, the great kitchens. Black smoke rose in 3 columns into the lightening sky, and over the highest tower, where the king's banner had hung for 9 generations, a new banner was flying, a silver tree on a black field. Vaedric pulled his horse up on the ridge. He did not curse. He did not howl. He looked at the burning city for a long, quiet moment, and then he turned to her, and his face was the face of a man who had finished being afraid. "They have taken the high stone," he said, "and they have begun the killing." A scout came up the pass from below. A young woman, riding hard, her horse foaming. She reined in beside them and saluted with a fist over her heart. "Sire, Lady Theron is on the high stone. She has declared herself queen. She has the council under guard. She is killing the loyalist captains in the market square, one every hour. She says she will continue until you come to her and bend the knee." "How many?" 42 so far, my lord. Mostly the kitchen staff. She is doing the cooks first." Cyrene's breath stopped. The scullery girls, the undercooks, the kitchen women who had fed her, dressed her, who had been her family for the months she had been Vedric's secret. The people who had no part in any of this. "Bran," she whispered. "The old cook. She will be among the first." Bran was the third, my lady. Bran was the first they put to the question. "The square is full of women who knew you. Theron has been asking each of them where you went. None of them will answer. None of them will. She will kill every last one of them before she runs out of names." Cyrene felt something inside her become very still. It was not the babies. It was something deeper. It was the white song banked under her ribs, waking up. She turned her horse toward the burning city. Vedric caught her bridle. "Cyrene, the 40 are still an hour behind. They will kill another one in 50 minutes. And another 50 minutes after that. We do not have an hour, Vedric. We have until the next bell." He did not let go of the bridle. "What are you proposing?" She looked at him. The dawn light was on her face, and her eyes were the color of bone in moonlight. "I am proposing that I walk into the market square and tell her where I went." Vedric did not let go of her bridle. "No. Vedric. No, Cyrene." His voice was not the voice of a king. His voice was the voice of a man whose throat had closed around the word. His gray eyes had gone wide in a way she had not seen before, and for the first time in the long night, she understood that the man who had walked half a kingdom on bare feet to find her was, underneath all of his shape and all of his power, simply a frightened person. "They will not touch me," she said. "You do not know what they will do. You have no idea what Theron will do. She has wanted what is in your belly since before you were old enough to bleed. Then she will not put a blade in me. She needs the children alive. She does not need you alive." The scout cleared her throat. "My lord, the next bell is in 40 minutes. The next woman they bring out of the cells is the undercook called Mira. I went to school with her. She is 22. She has a child of her own." Cyrene looked at the scout. The scout did not look away. "You knew Bran?" "Bran taught me to braid bread, my lady. I cried in her kitchen the day my mother died." Vedric closed his eyes. She watched him close them. She watched the long moment in which the man and the king fought each other behind his face, and she watched the king lose. He opened his eyes. "Tell me what you intend." "I intend to walk into the market square with my hands open and tell Lady Theron that I have come to spare her cooks. I intend to make myself the only prize she sees. While she is looking at me, you will be moving your 40 men through the south gate, and Olvar will be reaching the loyalist captains in the cells, and the council, whoever still lives, will be in motion. I do not need to win the square, Vedric. I need to hold her eyes. That is all. For how long? Until you tell me to stop." He drew a long, ragged breath. He turned to Olvar. "Olvar, take the lower road. Find Captain Renwyn at the Loyalist barracks. Tell him the king is alive and the queen is in the square. He will know what to do." "He will, sire." Vedric turned back to her. He took her hand and pressed it against his chest, over the place where his heart was beating, and he held it there until she could feel the rhythm of him in her palm. 40 minutes, he said. "Hold her eyes for 40 minutes. I will come for you. Do you understand me, Cyrene? I will come for you." "I know. Say it. You will come for me." He kissed the inside of her wrist. He let her go. She rode down the pass alone. The eastern gate of Morenhall had been broken off its hinges. The bodies of 2 of her king's gate guards lay in the gutter. She did not stop to look at them. She passed under the arch and into a city she had once walked through with linens on her hip, and the smoke from the burning barracks blew across her face, and somewhere off to her left, a woman was wailing. She rode through the long market street with her hood down and her face uncovered. The first person to recognize her was a baker she had bought bread from in another life. He was standing in the doorway of his shop with his apron stained with what was not flour. His eyes met hers across the street, and he opened his mouth to call her name, and she shook her head once, and he closed his mouth, and he did the only thing he could do, which was to step out into the street behind her and begin to walk in her direction. By the time she reached the market square, she had 30 silent townspeople walking behind her. The square was a ring of soldiers around a high wooden block. On the block stood Lady Theron Silverwood. The woman on the block was beautiful. The woman on the block was nothing she had imagined. Theron had a long, thin face and dark hair and very pale, very still eyes, and she was holding a curved knife loosely in her right hand. The blade was dark with what had been done with it that morning. At her feet, kneeling with her hands bound and her head pulled back by a soldier's fist, was a young woman in a stained kitchen smock. Mira, the undercook. Cyrene rode her horse to the edge of the soldiers and stopped. The square went silent. Theron turned, slowly, on the block. She saw the woman on the horse. Her gaze moved down to the curve of Cyrene's belly. It came back up to her face. Something moved behind those still eyes that Cyrene could not read, and she understood for the first time that Theron had not believed she would actually come. "Cyrene of nowhere," Theron said. Her voice was warm. Her voice was the voice a woman uses when she is welcoming a guest she has been expecting for a long time. "Daughter of a stolen line. You have walked into my square. I have. To save these women. To save these women. You understand that the moment your foot touches the stones of this square, you become mine. You understand that the spell that protects you from my men ends at the boundary of my reach. You understand this. I understand it. And still you come. And still I come." Theron lifted the curved knife. She looked at it for a moment as if she had forgotten it was in her hand. Then she looked back at Cyrene. "Get off the horse, sister." Cyrene dismounted. She walked across the empty stones of the square. She walked until she stood at the foot of the block, looking up at the woman in the dark dress. The soldier holding Mira loosened his grip. Mira sagged against the block, weeping silently. "Release her," Cyrene said. "In a moment." "Release her now." Theron smiled. "You do not give orders in this square, sister. Release the cook, captain." The soldier let Mira fall. The undercook slid to the stones and curled around herself and did not move. Theron descended the steps of the block. She stopped one pace from Cyrene. She was taller. Cyrene had not expected her to be taller. Those still eyes looked down into hers, and Cyrene felt for the first time the cold, patient hunger of the thing that had been hunting her bloodline for 9 generations. "You have something I want," Theron said softly. "I know. I will not take it from you yet. I will wait for the children to come. 6 months. Less. We can be very civilized about this, you and I. You will live in a tower. You will be fed. You will be allowed to walk in the gardens. When the children are born, I will take them. And I will let you live. I am not a cruel woman, Cyrene. I will let you live. You may even hold them, sometimes, from a distance." "And the king?" Theron's smile did not change. "The king is dead. The king has been dead since the autumn equinox. The thing that came running out of my brother's keep 3 nights past is a half-mad creature in a man's body, and my men will put it down before the next dawn." Cyrene felt the baby's turn. She felt the great song wake under her ribs. She kept her hands loose at her sides. She kept her face soft. She let her eyes fill with tears, because the tears were not difficult to find, and she let her shoulders bend, and she let the woman in the dark dress see what the woman in the dark dress wanted to see. That was a kitchen girl, who had finally understood that she had lost. A tower, Cyrene whispered. And a garden. A garden. And I may hold them. From a distance. I will come with you. Theron lifted a hand. A soldier stepped forward with a length of soft rope. Cyrene held out her wrists. The rope went around them. The knot was tied. Walk, sister, Theron said. Cyrene walked. She walked beside the woman who meant to keep her in a tower for 6 months, and then take her children and let her live. She counted, in her head, the slow heartbeats of the bell tower at the north end of the city. 28 minutes left. The first scream came from the south gate. It was a soldier's scream, not a woman's. The kind of scream a man makes when he has just understood, in the last fraction of a second of his life, that something very large and very fast has come around a corner he had not been watching. A second scream followed. A third. Theron stopped. Her gaze narrowed. The bell of the Loyalist barracks, the bell that had been silent for 2 days, began to ring. And from the south gate, riding at the head of 40 horsemen with his bare chest still streaked in the blood of the men he had killed on a heather slope at dusk, came Vedrick of Morinhall. He was not screaming, he was not shouting, he was riding very, very quietly, and the soldiers in the square were turning to face him, and Theron was lifting her curved knife, and Cyrene felt the great song in her chest open like a door. The babies inside her opened the door wider. She had not known they could do that. The white light came up out of her without her calling it, and the rope on her wrists fell apart in 2 clean pieces, and Theron spun toward her with the curved knife rising, and Cyrene turned to face the woman who had been hunting her bloodline for 9 generations, and she said, in a voice that was not entirely her own, "You have made a great many mistakes today, sister. The last one was thinking I came alone." Theron's curved knife came down. It did not reach her. The white light around Cyrene was not a wall, it was a hand. It closed around the descending blade and stopped it in the air a finger's breadth from her throat, and Theron's wrist twisted at an angle a wrist was not meant to twist, and the knife clattered onto the stones at their feet. Theron did not scream. Theron had never been the kind of woman who screamed. She stepped back, and her gaze went from Cyrene's face to the white light around Cyrene's hands, and for the first time, something that was not patient hunger moved through it. It was very brief. It was something like fear. "You are not strong enough," Theron said softly. "You have used the great song twice already tonight. I can see it in you." "I am not the one singing, sister." Theron's eyes flickered down to Cyrene's belly. The white light around Cyrene was not coming from her hands. It was coming from the curve under her ribs. It was rising up through her skin in a soft, steady glow, and the glow had a sound that was not a sound. 2 voices, 2 small voices, neither of them yet born, singing the great song together for the first time in 9 generations. Theron took another step back. Behind her, the south gate had become a tide. Vedrick had brought his 40 riders into the square at a dead run, and the Loyalist captains were coming up out of the cells under the kitchens, and the council, what remained of it, had thrown open the doors of the high stone, and the city of Morinhall was remembering, in the space of a single bell, who its king was. The Silverwood soldiers in the square broke, not all at once. They broke the way ice breaks under a horse's hoof, in a cracking outward pattern, and within 100 heartbeats, the men who had stood in a ring around the high block were running for the eastern gate, and the eastern gate was no longer theirs. Theron did not run. She drew a second knife from inside her sleeve. This one was thin and long, the color of a cloud. And Cyrene had been raised in the kitchens of Morinhall, and she knew what a Silverwood courtier's poison blade looked like. "I do not need you alive," Theron said. "I only need the children." She stepped forward. A black wolf came over the high block. He had not been a wolf when he rode through the south gate. He was a wolf now. He had shed his shape somewhere between the gate and the square, and the shape he wore on the block was the largest wolf Cyrene had ever seen. His fur the color of wet ink, his shoulders the height of a tall man's chest. He landed on the stones between her and Theron without a sound. Theron's eyes lifted. "There you are," she murmured. "There you are at last, my brother's borrowed brother." She lunged. The wolf moved. It was not a fight. It was the ending of a fight. Vedric's jaws closed around the woman's wrist before her knife had moved a hand's breadth, and she made one small sound. The sound of a woman who had spent 9 years preparing for a moment and had just understood that she had prepared for the wrong one. He did not kill her. He could have. He held her there, and he looked over the top of her shoulder at his queen. His gray eyes asked the question. Cyrene shook her head. "Not here," she said. "Not in front of these women. They have seen enough." The wolf made a low sound in his throat that might have been agreement. He twisted his head and Theron went down to her knees on the stones, and the loyalist captains were there before she had fully landed, and she was bound with her own soldier's rope, and she was lifted to her feet, and she was walked off the high stone of Morinhall forever. She did not look back at Cyrene. Cyrene was glad of that. The wolf shifted. Vedric stood on the stones in front of her with his bare feet bleeding again, and his bare chest still streaked with a long night of running, and he looked at her, and the white light in her belly began to fade. The babies had stopped singing. They had finished what they had needed to do. Cyrene's knees gave. He caught her before she struck the stones. She felt his arms close around her, and she felt the full weight of his shape against her, the full warmth of him, the full sound of his heartbeat thudding against her ear. She heard him say her name. She heard him say it again. "Vedric. I am here. The undercook. Mira. She is alive. She is being lifted now. The healers are coming. You held the square, my queen. You held it. Olvar. Olvar reached the captains. Olvar is alive. The babies. The babies are turning. I can feel them through your skin." She laughed. The laugh came out as a sob, and the sob came out as a laugh. And he held her through both of them. Behind her, the bell of the high stone began to ring. It rang 9 times. The signal that the king of Morinhall had returned to his city. He carried her to the high stone himself. He would not let anyone else touch her. He carried her up the long marble steps in his bare arms, and the council, what remained of the council, was waiting for them at the top of the stairs. The high stone was a black slab in the center of a round chamber. It was the seat the kings of Morinhall had been crowned on for 9 generations. It was, Cyrene noticed only now, exactly the same dark gray as Vedric's eyes. He set her on her feet. He held her by the hand. "Cyrene," he said, "daughter of the great song, mother of my heirs, will you bear the bond?" "I will." "Will you bear it openly, in the sight of these witnesses, without secrecy, without shame?" "I will." "Will you have me, knowing what I let happen to you?" "Vedric." "Cyrene, will you have me?" She put her hand against his face. She felt the rasp of his unshaved jaw under her fingers. She felt the warmth of his living skin. "I never stopped having you," she said. "I left a castle. I did not leave you. The man in the cellar was not the man I left." He bent. She tilted her head back, and she bared her throat to him, and he set his teeth against the place at the side of her throat, where the long muscle ran down into her shoulder, and the second mark went into her in one clean stroke. The bond closed. It did not explode. It did not roar. It settled. The way a long-running river settles when it finally reaches the sea, and Cyrene felt every burning hour of the past months go out of her hip at the same instant, and she felt every burning hour of his go out of him, and she stood on the high stone of Morinhall with both of her hands in his hair and her forehead against his. She saw behind her closed eyes what he had seen, the stone chamber under the Silverwood Keep, the thin gray light through the slit window, the long, slow waking, the voice in the corridor, his own voice, his own laugh. going past the door without ever knowing he was on the other side of it. She saw the moment he had understood. She saw the moment he had begun to run, and she understood at last that he had not been running across the kingdom toward her. He had been running toward the chance of forgiveness. He saw, behind his closed eyes, what she had seen: the cellar grate, the laughter, the small bright thing turning in her belly for the first time, the southern gate at dawn, the snow on the road, the long cold winter of believing she had loved a man who had laughed at her with his sworn brothers, the mark that would not stop burning, the walk into the market square with her hands open and the great song banked under her ribs. When they opened their eyes, they were both crying. Neither of them had any weeping left, and yet they were both crying, the way two people cry when the weeping is no longer for what was lost, but for what was found. The council bowed. The loyalist captains bowed. The kitchen women in the doorway, who had been brought up from the square with their hands still bound in soft rope, bowed. "My queen," said Olvar, from the back of the chamber. His gray eyes were full. "My king." The bells of Morinhall rang for 3 days. In the weeks that followed, the Silverwood Keep was opened, and the chamber under its floor was emptied, and the 7 other kingdoms sent emissaries to apologize for what their cousins of the Silver Tree had done. Arian's body was returned to the keep that had bred him. The Silverwood army of 800, finding itself without lord or lady, surrendered at the river crossing without a single blade drawn. The men were sent home. The captains were tried and either pardoned or hanged, each according to what they had done. Lady Theron was tried before the assembled councils, and she did not weep, and she did not beg, and she was sentenced to the long, cold service of the Northern Abbey, where the women who had once worn the silver tree as a crest now wore it as a kitchen apron, and where she would spend the rest of her days kneading bread for travelers who did not know who she was. Cyrene visited her once, in the 2nd year. She did not speak. Theron did not speak. They looked at each other across a long stone table for the time it took to drink a cup of tea, and then Cyrene rose and went home to her children. The children were born on the first warm night of the next spring, in a chamber that smelled of bog myrtle and lamp oil. A boy with gray eyes and his mother's brown hair. A girl with dark hair and a faint white glow in her small palms when she cried. Brella the midwife, who had been brought down from the moor at the queen's request, wept quietly while she cut the cords. Vedric did not weep. Vedric had finished weeping. He held his son in one arm and his daughter in the other, and he looked at Cyrene where she lay in the long bed under the window, and he said, in the low, rough voice she had loved before she had ever known its name, "Tell me their names, my queen." "The boy is Olvar," she said, "after the man who taught you to read." The old man, sitting in the chair by the door with his hands folded over his cane, made a small sound and turned his face away. "And the girl?" "The girl is Bran, after the woman who taught me to braid bread." He bent his head over his children. "Olvar and Bran," he said, "of the great song." The bond between them, the bond that had refused, against every law of the Wolfborn, to break, had become a thing without a mark and without a wound. It was not a chain. It was not a tether. It was the simple knowing between two people of where the other one was in the world at any given moment, and what their breathing felt like, and whether they had eaten, and whether they were warm. She knew at the end of every long day exactly when he was coming home. She did not need to wait for his footsteps in the corridor any longer. She knew them already, in her bones, before he had set them on the stones. And in the kitchens of Morinhall, where the new undercook was a young woman called Mira, who had once fallen on the stones of the market square and lived, the older women told a story to the kitchen girls who came up from the villages every spring. They told it in the long, quiet hours when the bread was rising. They told it about a girl who had once worn an apron in those same kitchens and had walked out of the southern gate one snowy night with a child in her belly and nothing else, and had come back, the next spring, with the great song in her hands and a king at her side. The kitchen girls did not always believe the story. The older women did not mind. The older women had been there. And on the long high pass north of the city, where the wind came down off the moors and across the heather, there was a small stone cottage that had been left empty since the night a king and a queen and an old man had ridden out of it under a cold spring moon. The villagers of Brackmere kept the roof in good repair. They swept the hearth. They left a fresh candle on the windowsill every winter solstice, and they did not, ever, sit on the flat stone beside the door. It was, they said, a stone for a king. Not for kings in general, for a particular king. For the one who had once sat on it and waited, with an old man's patience, for a kitchen girl to be ready to open her door.